Welcome to the LivXplore Podcast. If you like what you hear, please hit like and subscribe. Welcome. I'm Sean Payne, owner of LivXplore Real Estate and Lifestyle, and today I have with me our founding agent, Isaiah Chass. Thank you for joining us.
Of course. We're excited to bring some exciting content today about fractional ownership.
Yes, this is our third podcast. As Isaiah mentioned, we're going to talk about fractional ownership. Please make sure to hit the like button if you enjoy this podcast, and hit subscribe to make sure that you don't miss any of our future episodes. But let's get to fractional ownership. So what is fractional ownership? Fractional ownership is when you split the cost of an asset amongst a group of people. And in this case, it's real estate, whether it's a condo, single family home, a estate or luxury home that way. Fractional ownership's been a super hot topic like the last 12, 24 months, something like that, ever since COVID hit. But it's been around for a long time, for decades. It's been a way to hold real estate for many years prior to that, but it's become more topical recently. And mainly, again, because of what's been happening with COVID, and just it gives people another avenue to own a home, and often a second home in this case. So when you talk about fractional ownership, people automatically assume that you're talking about timeshares, and this is not a timeshare. Although kind of like when the usability is similar that way, how it's structured is totally different. So the main distinction between a timeshare and a fractional ownership is that with a timeshare, you're buying a right to use the property, and you don't have a legal ownership in the property, where a fractional ownership is just that. You have a little piece, a fraction of that property that you actually own that way. So that's often called a fractional interest. So.
Yeah, and the thing about the fractional interest rather than timeshare is with an increase in value on that property, your equitable share will increase its value as well. Whereas with the timeshare, obviously, an increase in market value doesn't make your position any more valuable than where it was before.
Right. And so some of the benefits of a fractional ownership is that it's just another model that allows you to acquire real estate that way. So, after the foreclosure crisis last time in like 2012, I'd say Airbnb and VRBO became more popular because people could come up, purchase a property, and then they would rent it out on a short-term basis to people that would cover their costs. So, I don't know what the statistics are, but people that use that model and buy a home and then do a short-term rental, they're really only living in that property, a couple months out of the year anyway. So what fractional ownership does is it kind of, it's just another model where you buy, anywhere from, let's say, a half to an eighth ownership in a property, and then you get to live in that property an allocated amount of time for how much you owe it that way. And the benefit to it is like, let's say, rather than coming in and having to buy, let's say you're coming up to Sonoma County and you want to buy a nice vacation rental and you have $1 million to spend. You can come in, you can spend that $1 million on a nice vacation rental, and then you have to spend, find a housekeeper and people to keep up the home in between and clean the property in between showings and things of that nature. This model, you buy a portion of the property, you can come up and sort of spend the same amount of time in the property, but then the other owners come in and live in the property when you're not there. It's not that you're renting it out to someone else. And so what this allows is, you can buy rather than, spending that $1 million and then turning around and renting out a property to cover your costs. Here you come in and you can buy like an eighth ownership or however much money you want to spend that way. And you can live in that property the same amount of time, a month or two out of the year, but you don't have to worry about maintenance and upkeep and cleaning the home and things of that nature, because you have an agreement in place with the other owners, and you have a large corporation behind you that's overseeing everything and making sure it gets done that way. So,
yeah, and there's a couple big players that already are involved in this. One of them being Pacaso. I remember probably 12 months ago, middle of last year, we went out to a property in the town of Sonoma.
The heat.
It was pretty incredible. I think we counted I can't remember if it was over 100 or 96 signs, like just in this little court of people saying, "No, Pacaso, we don't want you here," things of that nature.
all the shares still sold.
They did.
So yeah, they still sold that way. But yeah, there was a lot of heat that way going on regarding Pacaso. And that's why Pacaso, that's why fractional ownership is in the news really, is because of Pacaso right now.
Right.
So.
And I think a lot of people are hearing the name because of the headlines, whether that's they have had some legal battles between certain cities and certain towns, particularly, the argument between whether it's a short-term rental or fractional ownership, because there is a difference there.
Or a timeshare as well.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, the reason is because, with Pacaso, they set it up as an LLC. Each property has its own LLC, and people said, well, you're really selling timeshares. The issue is that, for decades, again, people have acquired properties with friends or acquaintances that way and set up an LLC. So they're really not doing anything different than's been done in the past. And that's why it's not really a timeshare that way. So,
right. I'm going to jump back for any of you that don't know what Pacaso was prior to this. Pacaso is a company that will go in and purchase a property and put that property in an LLC, limited liability company, and then they will sell shares of that property in the LLC at certain shares, whether that's an eighth share, a 1/4 share, or a half share interest. With those interests, you can schedule to stay a certain amount of days. Whether if you have an eighth share, that you get up to 14 nights at one time. If you have half share, you get to stay up to 42 nights at one time. And that's all dependent on, how much share of the property you have. The cool thing, or the interesting thing about Pacaso is that once all the shares are purchased, if all the shareholders agree that they don't want Pacaso involved anymore, they can all vote on that and agree to kick them out of the picture.
Right. That's a little unusual, I'd say, and a benefit to the Pacaso model, because a lot of times in the fractional ownerships, they have like an ownership club that requires you to maintain an agreement with a property management company associated with the home, and then you don't have the option of changing management companies if you want. So Pacaso having that model, that's kind of unusual and benefit that way. And as I said, in a lot of times in fractional ownerships, that's one of the negatives, is that you don't have the option to pick who's managing the property that way. In Pacaso, that isn't the case. Another argument against this type of model is that, we just have this we haven't built enough homes in the last 10 or 20 years nationwide, but in Northern California specifically. And so this type of model, adding another model, just allows more people to buy homes in this area and increases the competition. And that's really kind of like the negative to this model that way. And I don't know if it is a negative. Pacaso makes a good point that, a lot of their buyers that come up to, we're going to use Sonoma County as an example because that's where we're at. But, if you have buyers coming up or people coming up to Sonoma County, they're going to acquire real estate. That's what they're looking to do. The model actually takes pressure off the housing market, because you're taking, with eighth shares, potentially 8 different owners are buying one property, rather than those people going out and acquiring, granted they wouldn't be as nice or fancy properties, but they're going to go out and buy 8 individual properties and then short-term rental it out. So I can see, I don't know statistically if that's actually the case, but I think they make a strong argument that way, that it may not actually hurt the housing inventory that way, because most of the people that are interested in a Pacaso home have the ability and the means to buy a home. Maybe not a Pacaso $5 million home, but they're going to go out and buy that nice, second home at $1 million, 1.2, something like that, and short-term rent it that way. So,
right. That was, one of their other bigger arguments, is that all those buyers that would go in together are going to be the buyer that is going to instead purchase the home that might be a teacher or a local professional, where it takes the strain off of the housing demand on those types of homes where people are living in the area, and puts it on a type of property where typically it's probably going to be, a different type of buyer.
No, I think that's a really important point to make. Like, as long as Pacaso or whatever, similar type fractional ownership companies like if they're mainly focused on like the luxury home market, I totally see that being the case. If you have where I could see that being an issue is that like if a Pacaso comes in, I think there's been a couple examples too where they've bought like lesser value homes, like around $1 million, and then they sell those shares off for like, $150,000. That's a home potentially that like, you know, someone local here would buy, and then you've increased the competition for that type of person. But, as long as their model is going after the luxury home buyer, the luxury home, I see that being less of an impact. But if these fractional ownerships all of a sudden start buying more of like your traditional first time home buyer or move up home buyer properties, then I could see that being an issue. And kind of going on that, there is, I came across recently, a new startup called Pad Split. One of their markets is in Las Vegas, and their testing markets is in Las Vegas. And so rather than the second home market, this is someone for like, first time home buyer or someone buying a property as their primary residence, but buying a fraction of their property. And so they have a bedroom, and they live in that one bedroom, and they own that portion of the home or whatnot, but they don't own the entire home. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out. I could see how this could work in some markets that way, but it's something that I'm keeping an eye on that way. I don't know if it'll make it a way up here right now, but in the future, I definitely see as housing becomes more and more expensive that people may look for these type of models that way. And kind of going off that, will this fractured ownership model last? Yes, it has been. It's already been there. It's just becoming topical, and now it's in the press, but it's already been there. So yes, you'll just see more of it, but it's been around for a long time. I think I was down at the Inman conference a few weeks back, and they had a Pacaso rep there talking about their business model, and I can't remember the percentage that they've increased this year over last, but it's their model is gaining in popularity, and they had $400 million in sales in North America in the first quarter of 2022. So I just don't think that's going anywhere that way. So it's going to be around. I think people have to get used to the idea and get their head around it that way, but it's a model that's going to be here for a while. It's been here for a long time that way. I know that Sun House, which is another fractional ownership model. They just partnered with the agency to help work with them in North America. At LivXplore, we've partnered with Beautiful Places, and they're one of the original short-term rental agencies that way. So I think that you're going to see more and more brokerages partnering with fractional ownership models, because it's just another way to own real estate. So you can either like say, no, this isn't a viable model, and not get into it and not learn about it, or you can incorporate it into your business model, because it is going to be here to stay for some time. So
yeah. I mean, I think, we live in a world now where, one thing gets a single headline and it blows up. And I think that's a little bit what happened to Pacaso. It caught one bad headline in a few key areas, and then everyone suddenly started having negative connotation to it. But I mean, you look at the model, it's a viable model. I don't think, 10, 15 years ago, anyone would have thought Uber would have been a solution. And
right.
Now look at it. Now no one can imagine having life without it. So not that, that's really the same as Pacaso, but I think people are going to loosen up to it and warm up to it when they realize that it's not an Airbnb where you're having, a group of 15 people there partying for the weekend. They actually are going to want to preserve the value,
their interest in the property, right? Yeah, that's what I think people need to understand is like, if I had the choice of a short-term rental or a Pacaso home next to me, I think I'd take the Pacaso home, because again, I have owners there where like, how often do you have someone that just rents that Airbnb? And again, I know the County of Sonoma is putting ordinances in place to try to stop this, but those people can throw a big rager and never come back, and they have no skin in the game. Where someone with Pacaso, they probably don't want to upset their neighbor, because they're going to be back in a few weeks to enjoy the home again. So yeah, I totally think that once people get a better understanding of this model, they'll be more open to it. I think that I don't even see it being an issue. If we had plenty of houses to sell, if we had enough housing inventory, I don't think anyone blinks over this model.
Right.
But because we are in this housing crunch, that adding another model into, another way that people can purchase homes creates more of a crunch, and that's where the negative press comes from that way. So.
I think it did a little bit stem from the fact that I don't know if some communities were as eager to see all the Silicon Valley Bay Area buyers just come up into their town. They, had a certain, not way of life, but they were used to things a certain way. And then when they saw all that new money come up during COVID, it was just a bit of a shock to them.
Right. But it was.
Again, at the end of the day, I think everyone's going to loosen up to it and realize that it really isn't such a bad thing.
Yeah, eventually it'll take some time. So if you have any questions about fractional ownership or any of the models, please reach out to us. You can certainly ask questions down below or just message us directly and we'll get them answered for you. Thank you for listening to this podcast. Again, this is our third episode. I'm Sean Payne, owner of LivXplore Real Estate and Lifestyle. And Isaiah, thank you for joining us today. Welcome to the LivXplore Podcast. If you like what you hear, please hit like and subscribe.